So good afternoon, everybody. It is so wonderful to be back here. What was our regular Talmud Lunch and Learn is now the new Thinking Talmudist series, and I'm very, very excited that we are starting today, right at the beginning of the summer. I think today is the first official day of summer, and it's very, very exciting. So with the heat of the summer here in Houston, we're going to match it with the heat of the Talmud. So, you know, you always wonder, what is the sacrifice that one needs to give up in order to observe the Torah? What am I giving up? What am I giving up to observe the Torah? And we're not the only ones to ask that question. The Talmud asks this question. The Talmud asks the same question. What are we ready to give up? What do we need to give up in order to be a Shomer Shabbos Jew, in order to be a kosher Jew, one who eats kosher, in order to be a Jew who follows and abides by the laws of the Torah? What do I need to give up? The answer is a resounding nothing. You need to give up nothing, because everything that the Torah says is prohibited, there's a way in which it's permitted. Everything that the Torah tells us is prohibited, there's a way in which it is permitted. Right? There's a way to do it that's permitted. I'll give you the Talmud now in page 109B in Chullin, in Curated Chullin. It says as follows. Now, in the coming weeks, what we're going to do is we're going to select different pieces of Talmud, and each week, we'll discuss here at the Talmud Lunch and Learn at 12 o'clock on Fridays. Here at the Torch Center, we're going to learn a different piece of Talmud every week. So if you miss 1 week, the next week, you know, but we have our committed group here. We're missing still a few. We're looking forward to seeing you back here, Howie and Howard. And we're looking forward to seeing you back, but hopefully we'll be able to do this every single week with a new piece of Talmud. Now, just before we begin, last week we started this. And last week we talked about, and this wasn't on video, so we're just going to do a catch-up for those who missed it. Last week we brought the Talmud in Brachot 5a. And the Talmud in Brachot brings a verse in the Torah at the end of Parshas Yisro, right? And at the end of that parsha, right by where the Ten Commandments are given, there's a verse that has all of these different expressions of what was given at Mount Sinai. And what we learned from the Talmud was that the Torah, the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses were given. The explanations, all the oral Torah, the Mishnah, the Talmud, the prophets, the writings, all of that was given already at Mount Sinai. And we learned it from the verse in the Torah. And we remember, we had over here the triangle to remind us that you can't just make up things in Judaism. No one has the authority to forgive your sins, and no one has the power to say that you're not obligated to certain mitzvahs in the Torah. Everybody is obligated to the same exact rules, the rabbi and the simpleton alike. Everyone has the same exact obligations. Now, and we brought the verses, and we went through all of that. So today we're going to be at 109b in the Tractate of Chullin. The Gemara says as follows. Amra le Yalta le Rav Nachman. Yalta said to Rav Nachman, her husband, Michti, let us see. Call the Asalan Rachmana Sharlan Kavase. Whatever the merciful one forbade us, he permitted us something corresponding. Okay, God prohibited certain actions upon his people. The Torah tells us there's certain things we can't eat, certain things we can't do. Right? Here Yalta is telling her husband, to everything that God said is forbidden, there is a way in which it's permitted. Osarlon dima, sharolon kavda. God forbade us is a verse in the Torah which tells us in Deuteronomy 12:24 that it is forbidden for one to eat blood. It says ki adamu hanefesh, because the blood is the soul. So you're not allowed to eat blood from an animal, That's why all meat is salted before we eat it, before it's even put on the shelves. That's interesting. When my mother was, my mother's not that old. My mother's a pretty young woman. May she live and be well. But when my mother was in school, they taught them how to kosher a chicken. Right? Today they don't do that because you buy ready packaged chickens. But after an animal is properly slaughtered, it's checked that it didn't have any broken limbs. It's checked that it didn't have any other types of deformities or something that would make it non-kosher. So after it's slaughtered, it's washed, it's soaked, okay? So it softens it. It's salted, and then it's rinsed. And there's a process in how this is done. And the salt, that's where the word kosher salt. That's where it comes from. It's more coarse, and that thick salt would absorb all of the blood and get it out of the chicken or the meat or whatever it is. So what is amazing is that you're not allowed to eat the blood. If it's not salted properly, you can't eat that meat until you salt it. Right? It needs to be done properly. Ki adamu nefesh, because the blood is the soul. Okay. So we're not allowed to eat the blood. So what are we allowed to do? God said you can't do this, but what can you do? Well, you're allowed to eat liver, right? From an animal. Chicken liver, right? You can eat liver. And what is liver? Okay, liver is made up entirely of hardened blood, and it tastes like blood. Right? That's what Rashi says. Okay? So, it's prohibited on one side, and it's permitted on the other side. God tells you how you can do it in a way that is permitted. Okay? Any questions you're welcome to ask. Sorry to our friends online. You got to be here live to be able to ask. Nida dam tahor. God forbade us relations with a woman who's a nida, right? But He allowed us relations with a woman who we're married to, who has blood of purity, right? And there are different types of blood. There's menstrual blood. There's other types of blood, and there's only one specific that is prohibiting a woman to her husband, right? But there are other bloods that aren't prohibiting. Okay, chelev behema, chelev chaya, right? God forbade the chelev, which is a certain fat of a domesticated animal, but permitted chelev of an undomesticated animal. Chazir mocha de shibuta. God forbade us to eat pork, but permitted us the brains of shibuta. Shibuta is a type of fish. It's a type of fish, and the brains of that fish taste exactly like pork. Not almost. Exactly like pork. Right? Anybody going out on a fishing expedition trying to find that fish? Right? Girusa lishna de kavra. Right? He forbade us girusa. Girusa is a non-kosher bird species, says Rashi, but He did permit us fish tongue. Yes?
Kind of confused. How would you know what pork tastes like if you're not allowed to eat pork?
Well, that's a great question. That's a great question. We're going to address it right in a minute. We're going to address that, okay? Okay? If you don't know what blood tastes like, how do you know that this tastes like blood? This is another proof that the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. Even this piece of Talmud was given at Mount Sinai, because otherwise how in the world would they know? Well, the Creator of heaven and earth knows. He created everything that's in it. He says, listen, I'm not letting you have this, but here's the kosher format. I'm not letting you have this, here's the kosher format. That's the only way we could know, because otherwise someone would have to taste the pork, right?
That's right.
And it's not an option of a Talmudist,
but
right?
A non-Jew can try both.
Non-Jew, yeah, that's true. That's true.
You're gonna believe
You're
him?
gonna
You're gonna believe everybody tells you?
So exactly, you want to see for yourself.
100 non-Jews.
You get right, exactly. So Ashes Ish, the Torah forbade us for a man to be with a woman who's married, right? But grusha bechaye bala, but a man could be with a divorcee when her ex-husband is still alive, right? So it's like, right? Then eshes ach yevama. The Torah forbade us one to be with his brother's wife, but there's a way in which it is permitted if the brother passed away and there's the levirate marriage, right? But inon lemechol bisra b'chalva, I may eat. So after this, the rabbi said, I would like to eat something that has the taste of meat cooked with milk. I want a cheeseburger. How do I get to get my cheeseburger? So Omar Luhu Reb Nachman l'tabache. Reb Nachman ordered his chefs, zvikule kachale, right? Impale for her udders on a spit and roast them. So if you take the udders of a cow, which has been delivering milk, right? And now that meat of the udders, right, is grilled, right? So now what happens? You have a delicious cheeseburger that is soaked with milk, and now the milk and the meat together makes it okay, right?
I'm gonna have to try that. Let you know.
So that is
Utterly ridiculous.
utterly ridiculous. Right. So the thing is like this. Think for a second, okay? Think for a second, right? Just by the way, bubble gum, if it's not kosher, which many of them are not kosher, the ones you find in most of the supermarkets by the checkout counters, right? Those are not kosher. Well, they have something which is called glycerin, right? Glycerin is pig fat. But there is a comparable to that, which is called glycerol, which is fish fat, right? Yeah. And it's from a kosher fish, right? We know we have the mock crab, the kani, right, which is a mock crab, right? So it's to everything. You have to understand the brilliance of this is where God gives us a Torah. God says, listen, I'm giving you the manual for living. I'm giving you all of the tools to maximizing life. I'm giving you everything you can possibly imagine to enjoy every aspect of life. And there are going to be those who are going to say, huh? Really? But I want my pork. I want my pork. Hashem says, you know what? There's a proper way to do it. There's a way in which you can do it that's kosher. There's a way in which you can do it that is not repugnant to the soul. Right? It's a very beautiful understanding we need to have. God doesn't want us to suffer in His Torah. The purpose of Torah is not to make us miserable. The purpose of Torah is not to make it, oh, you can't do this, oh, you can't do that, oh, you can't do this, right? And the people many times can get carried away by, oh, this is a stringency, you can't do this, you can't do that. Judaism is not about what you can't. Judaism is about a relationship. It's all about a relationship, right? We all know that if we had a spouse that was sensitive to something, right? So you find the way to do whatever you want to do, taking into consideration that sensitivity. God isn't sensitive to us eating pork. Our soul is. Our soul is. It says that when someone eats non-kosher, what is it? It brings timtum halev. It brings craziness of the heart. Right? It has an effect. Why? How do we know it? Well, who's the manufacturer? Who's the manufacturer? The manufacturer is the Almighty God, creator of heaven and earth. And God says, this is no good for you. I built this car. I'm telling you, don't put water in, put gasoline. Right? And if you don't, no problem. It's not going to work. You're going to ruin your car. By us, we think, well, everything is my body. Right? So if it makes me feel better, right? But God says there's something more than a body. Body is just the clothes. There's a soul. The soul that's clothed by our body. How are we taking care of that soul? So you know what? You need those things. You want to taste blood? Here's liver. You want to taste pork? Here's the brain of the shibuta fish. You want to be. There's all of these ideas that we feel sometimes in a very limited perspective, right? That we feel that we're being, come on, why do I need to give up on this pleasure? Everybody's eating this, what do you call that shrimp sushi, right? They have that shrimp in the, whatever it is, right? Or crab, whatever it is.
Sushi.
I don't like it anyway, but that's why I don't know what it's called. But you know what? God says, you know what? There's a kosher alternative which will taste exactly the same. Now, there's something else that's very, very important to remember, is that as we were talking about different things, some of you were giving faces like, ugh, I don't want that. It sounds disgusting, right? I would never want to eat it anyway, right? So Rashi tells us something very, very interesting. In Leviticus, Rashi says that one should never say about something which isn't kosher, ugh, it's disgusting. But rather you should say, it's amazing, but God doesn't want me to eat it. Right? Because if you say it's disgusting, what's the reward you get for that? You're repulsed by it anyway, so no wonder you don't eat pork, right? But if you say, you know what, it must be amazing, but you know what? God told me not to eat it, and that's why. Right? It's like, think of it as a parent, right? You tell your child, don't cross the street because it's dangerous. The child says, I don't want to cross the street anyway. Right? Or, no, you know what? You said I'm not to, and therefore I'm not going to. Right? You understand the difference?
Becoming a challenge.
Exactly. One, you're recognizing and you're acknowledging the challenge that's in front of you. And the other one, you're saying, I'm not in the game at all. Yes, you had a question.
I don't care anyway.
Yeah, I'm not enjoying this conversation because there are so many other substitute foods you could eat besides pork. And you're talking about, well, you could substitute that with something else. To me, it's against the spirit of the prohibition.
Excellent question. Excellent question. I agree with you. I agree with you. It never bothered me. It never bothered me 1 minute in my life that I could not eat pork. It never bothered me. I never even had a remote desire. Now, I can't really say that on cheeseburgers because, I mean, you see those advertisements on television sometimes. It's like, you're like, maybe it is good. Maybe it is good. I have no idea. I've never tasted it. I even couldn't get myself to eat it in the Greens vegetarian restaurant. They have some. I'm like, I just can't. I can't imagine it, right? So, but there are people who do. There are people who do. To them, it's a big challenge. There's some people it's a technical problem, and some people it's a spiritual problem. Okay? Some people, no, this is the food I like to eat. So till I don't have the food I like to eat, the Torah's not for me. There are other people, it's nothing to do with the food. It's the spiritual idea. Why is God limiting me? Why is being Jewish limiting? Well, it isn't. It isn't at all. It doesn't have to be. And it's for those people that we have this Talmud. This Talmud is not telling us, you know what, there's a trick around it. Right? There's no trick around Shabbos, for example. People say, oh, now with technology, because we can set Shabbos clocks, so we can trick Shabbos. We're not tricking Shabbos. God doesn't want you to suffer. Right? He doesn't want you to suffer. There's a way to do it that's okay. This way doesn't work because God said it's prohibited. So there's another way to do it. Yes.
I know this is online, so I'll be brief.
It's fine.
So, this brains of a fish that tastes like pork, this was written in the Talmud?
Yeah, it's a Talmud. It's written
So
2,000 years ago.
So,
How did they know?
how did they know?
That's exactly the
Yes.
idea.
Yeah, that's exactly-
How did they know? Were they zoologists?
No, no.
They knew every fish?
But they saying it came from Hashem? Did it?
Yes.
But how, but it didn't, it's not in the written Torah. Is it that if this fish tastes like
Right,
pork?
but this is orally transmitted, generation to generation, all the way from Moses.
It's from the
The
oral.
oral Torah is an oral transmission that was given from Moses at Mount Sinai and written down by Aaron and Joshua and the children of Aaron. And
It's in the Mishnah?
it's the Talmud. It's
I
right over
understand,
here
but
in
the Talmud was written, the Babylonian Talmud, which it seemed was written. more-
Explains the Mishnah. Oh, this was written in the early, the beginning of the first century.
The Babylonian? I
Yeah.
thought it was like
2,000 years ago.
I thought it was 6th or 7th century. I'm wrong.
No, before that.
The Talmud?
Yeah, yeah. It was written by Ravina and Ravashi. It was collected. It was assembled by Ravina and Ravashi, right? Because again, you've had years and years, and they had, you know,
Okay, I get it.
2 centuries.
So that's a proof of the Torah, because nobody else could say that.
More. What are we talking about? You had a tremendous collection, 2 millennia, right? From the time you had probably 1,300 years from the time Moses gave the Torah, got the Torah, received the Torah at Mount Sinai, all the way till the Jewish people had a Talmud. And then you probably had another 1,000 years till you had Maimonides. And then you had another 300 years till you had the Shulchan Aruch. And then we have 500 years later, we have the Mishnah Berurah by the Chavetz Chaim. And now, 100 years later, it's us here today. But none of this, you have to understand, and it's a very good question that you're asking. No place nothing in the Talmud is made up. There's proofs for everything that's said here. If you want, we can go through some of the commentaries here. You ready for some of the commentaries? We'll go through it. Okay. Okay. For every food or act which the Torah prohibited, there is another food or act from which the same pleasurable sensation as that resulting from the forbidden food or act can be derived and yet is permitted, as Yalta will proceed to illustrate. This is purposely planned by God so that we would recognize that his intention in prohibiting any given item was not in order to deny us the pleasure inherent in that item. All right? I'll give you that pleasure, but there's a way to do it that's proper. All right? The liver is made up entirely of hardened blood, and it tastes like blood. The commentaries explain that we know that the liver is not included in the Torah's prohibition against consuming blood because the Torah states, do not eat it, referring to blood. You shall spill it on the ground like water. This implies that the blood that can be spilled like water is prohibited, but the liver, which is made up of hardened blood, that cannot be spilled. That is permitted. Alternatively, Aruch HaShulchan suggests that the permit to eat liver is derived from the fact that the Torah permitted the Kohanim to eat all parts of the animal that are not sacrificed on the altar. Since the liver is not one of the parts sacrificed on the altar, it is permitted for consumption. Okay? And neither is a woman who has discharged uterine blood, hymenal blood, and blood which a woman discharges during certain days after giving birth are bloods of purity, which do not render her prohibited for relations. Nowadays, even a discharge of blood of purity renders a woman prohibited, so the Alta statement refers to strict Torah law. The Torah states, any chelev of an ox, lamb, or goat you shall not eat. These are the 3 kosher domestic animals. The chelev of undomesticated animals is permitted. The shibuta is a species of kosher fish whose brains taste the same as pork meat. Girusa is a non-kosher bird species. This bird is discussed earlier in 62b. Maybe we'll do that a different time. Of Tractate Chullin. Fish tongue tastes the same as girusa. All right? As this non-kosher bird species. I guess what do people eat? What type of bird species is like a special?
Quail?
Is it quail?
Quail or,
Well,
aren't they they're kosher?
Well, they are
They
kosher.
are
right?
Kosher, yeah.
Yes.
Killed
That was
prey.
a bird that hunts.
Right. You can't. That's
Bird
right.
of prey, yeah.
Right. Now it's interesting that we mentioned this recently, but the Midrash says that an eagle is a very, very merciful animal. Very, very merciful animal. And that the eagle is, by the way, the only animal that holds its young when it flies over its back. Because most birds hold their young under them when they fly. The reason for that is that they don't get kidnapped, that the babies don't get kidnapped from the other birds. So they hold it under. But the eagle that flies the highest,
That doesn't
right?
work.
He doesn't want to hold it on the bottom because they'll come from the bottom. So he puts them above his back. But there's another thing that the Midrash says, that the eagle would catch. There would be the baby calf, right? The mother would walk with its baby, with its young, and it would kick it off the edge of the cliff, and the eagle would catch the young calf and bring it back to the top of the mountain, and then the mother would would let it live. So that's a great mercy that this animal displays, that this bird displays. Why wouldn't this be a kosher animal? What's that?
Because it
Because
hunts.
it's prohibited?
So this is the Midrash says an amazing thing. The Midrash says, I believe it's in Parshas Vayakel or Pekudei, one of them. It says, the Midrash, that because the eagle has such a high intensity of mercy, as human beings, we wouldn't be able to exist with such a high level of mercy. It's such a, we wouldn't be able to survive if we had such mercy. And we see, it's interesting because we spoke about this in our other class on, is heaven a red state or a blue state? We talked about the virtues of liberalism, like Avraham Avinu. We spoke about the virtues of conservatism, like Yitzchak, being responsible. Right? So what is Avraham? Avraham is 4 doors open of his tent. He is welcoming to everyone. He's praying for all the wicked people. He prays, right? He's trying to just give everybody an opportunity to grow and to become something special. Give the handouts, no problem. Soup kitchens, whatever you need, right? But what was the result of that? The result of that was having a Yishmael. A Yishmael who became an adulterer. Because love knows no bounds. Because that openness and that acceptingness of everything goes, makes no boundaries. Isaac, on the other hand, was all about the boundaries, all about the structure, all about the rules, all about, get a job, be responsible, grab yourself by your bootstraps and get started, right? And what was the result of that? Esav. Esav was a murderer. He decided who lived and who didn't live. He didn't like what you did, chop chop, right? He became the judge and the jury. So either way, it's not great. Abraham, Isaac. What was the balance? The balance was Jacob, who was able to later have the tribes. Right? The tribes came out of Jacob because he was the balance of those 2 virtues. Each one was an extremist to a different way. You had Abraham to one way, you had Isaac to another way. Comes the third, and that's Isaac. And that's Jacob. And Jacob brings the best of both worlds. He brings the kindness and he brings... It's interesting that when Abraham asks his servant to go find a wife for Isaac, what does he tell him to look for? A woman who's kind. Right? A woman who's kind. Who was Abraham's wife? Abraham was all kind. What was his wife? His wife was Sarah. What? She was chop chop. I want Ishmael out. She's the tough one. So you always need to have that act of kindness and that act of a strong hand. And that's why Isaac, who had that strong hand, needed a wife who would be that kindness. You need to have that balance. You had Aaron and Moses. Who was Aaron? Aaron was loving
Peacemaker,
peace.
yeah.
He was a peacemaker, just love and get along, and right? And what was Moshe? Holding a stick. Right? You always have these 2 different components. We have the same with Shammai and Hillel. Also a Talmud we discussed a few weeks ago. Right? Yes.
The passages that you're reading as far as the prohibited foods.
Right.
Does it also include the prohibited parts of the cow, like the hind quarters, in the same passage?
It doesn't say it right here. But
Is it much later on?
I'm sure that there's someplace else we'll find about that where the permitted part of that. I don't know that it's anything unique or different than any other piece of meat.
It's just that it was part of the sacrificial
Offerings.
offerings
Right.
to God.
I don't know. It's a good question. I have to look into it.
Rabbi, it's interesting about the kashrut thing, because for those of us who gave up forbidden foods by choice, you know, when you talk about, oh, this tastes like this, I mean, who cares? I mean,
Right.
you know, you gave it up, you gave it up. It used to taste good. I loved lobster bisque and certain things that I can't have now, but it doesn't matter. But it's interesting that, I guess, you know, it's like two different groups. The people who have never had stuff, any of that stuff, like you, people who've grown up that way, and then those of us who've had it and chose to give it up and don't really seek. I mean, I don't seek out things. I wouldn't seek out some fish whose brains taste like pork
Right.
because I miss pork. I don't.
Right.
You know?
But think about it like this: you have an entire industry today, known as the food industry, right? And everything is about the menu, and it's about what type of food and where they get their
Yeah.
quality. The quality of their food is from this. They get it from this farmer, and they get it from that.
Yeah.
Eating this type of grain or that type of corn or whatever it is, right? And people are ready to pay a high premium to buy something to have the honor of buying it from Whole Foods, right? People are ready to go to Whole
Yeah.
Foods and spend $17 on a box of cereal, right? And yet people get upset when a piece of kosher meat costs them $3 more, right? Because you need to pay for a slaughter, it's not being shot, and it's not being tased, right? And it's not being electrocuted, and it's being salted, and it's being checked, and it's being, and all of that is extra work, it's extra labor, it's extra, right? So it costs you $3 more a pound, and people kvetch about it. It's like, it's crazy, this Judaism thing is just ridiculous, right?
To me.
Right? The truth is that if a doctor said it's healthier for you, you should eat it, there's, whoa, a doctor said, right? But if God said, no, what does God know, right?
But you see my point. I mean, it's very interesting for somebody who's in a different place
Yeah.
to sit and listen to that. I mean, I don't care. About
100%, right.
Tastes like pork,
Right.
so what?
But I will tell you
But
that
it has-
I have an individual who calls me up every time he has kosher meat. He's like, Rabbi, why does kosher meat always need to be this salty? Well, why does kosher meat always need to be this expensive? Why does kosher meat, whatever, always kvetching about it? And you'd wonder, right? So what's the alternative? He's like, oh, I'm missing out if I'm not eating the other stuff. And that's again, the Torah is not dealing with people who are, in this piece of Talmud, it's letting you know you're not missing out.
Yeah.
You're not missing out. Yes.
To me, the concept, bottom line concept, it's not all these little specific things. It's self-control,
Self-control.
it's observance, and it's acceptance of God.
Choice.
He's laid it down. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if
Yeah,
this
it's choice.
food or that food.
100%.
It's self-control,
Yeah.
observance, acceptance of God. Bottom line, all these little details, it's ridiculous to even
Well, that's, no,
worry
wait a
about.
minute. Well, I think that that's the proof of the Torah, these other things, is what I think he's saying.
Yeah.
Because who's gonna know that a fish brain tastes like pork? Who's
Yeah,
gonna know
right.
that?
Right.
That's,
No,
so
but he's
that's
saying,
it, because they're
right,
doing it-
but he's saying even before that, right? Why do we need to, who cares?
That's what
God
I'm
says
saying.
do it, finish, right?
Right.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
true if someone is of a spiritual status, if someone's at the level. We know many people today, many people today, even if they saw God sitting right in front of them and say, I'm still an atheist, right?
Yeah.
You know that the people would do that, especially if they're on college campus, then they have a legal obligation not to think, right? Right? And in most cases, right? So this is not referring to those who are spiritually committed or dedicated. These are people who are sitting back and saying, you know what? I'm not giving up my stuff. I'm not giving up my pork. I'm not giving up my. I want to be with whoever I want to be with, and I want to do whatever I want to do. And no one's gonna. You know what? You're not gonna miss out. You're not gonna lose out. And it's for us to just strengthen ourselves, to remember that, you know what? It's a no lose situation. You will only benefit by following the dictates of Hashem.
There are advantages in self-control.
Absolutely. Right, but again, that's already on a higher level. Look at the whole world around us. Everything's about no self-control.
Exactly.
Everything's about no
Exactly.
self-control. Right? That's why you're a thinking Talmudist. Right? That's precisely why. Because many people are not here today. And I'm not saying that everybody who's not here is busy indulging. I'm just saying that, but there is an entire world out there of indulgence, of just What can I do to fulfill myself and be richer and fuller and eat better food, and people are ready to travel to a corner of the globe to find a certain type of menu or a certain type of item to eat. Everything that you have in non-kosher, you have in kosher. Now, good luck finding a shibuta fish, right? But go find it and eat its brains so that you know, so you could taste what pork tastes like. But, what's that? You want to find out what a shibuta fish is? I don't know what it is. I have no idea what it is. It doesn't say it here. Art Scroll doesn't tell
You'll be
us.
able to find it out.
Right? So I want to turn off the video here. We'll have a continued conversation. But I want to thank our friends online. If you care, you share. Right? Share these videos. Thank you so much. Right? You know that's the new thing. If you care, you share. And thank our friends for joining us online. And have a magnificent, remarkable Shabbos. Thank you so much for joining us.